Well, hello everyone. I'm delighted to be here and I'm glad to be able to share my personal experiences about the iris and what it means to me. I'd like to thank the members of IIPA, the administration, the board, all those, many of whom I've known for years. Thank you for supporting the work I do and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Basically, I'm going to go through a series of different categories. One, I'm going to give you more of a history about how I got into iris. I'm going to show you some of the constitutions of iris, though most of you already know a lot about the constitution of the iris. I'm going to show you what I feel about it. I'm also going to show you how I use the family tree, the body types, consistent within the birth order, as how to combine the inner nature of the iris and the outer display and the phenotype or body type. I'm going to show you how that works and how I do a consultation. But I'm also going to show you in the final part of it, I'm going to show you how and why I use cycles and seasons as a primary potential training or remedy of the underlying problems that we sometimes find in the iris. Somewhere in there, I expect that to be 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to pause for a session or two, and we can take this as many times as you like. I'm going to do some live sessions at 2 different times of the day so that people at different time zones of the world can participate and ask me direct live questions about the entire system. So that'll be some feedback, and I'll be able to give you the opportunity to ask those questions, and I can pull up things and we can lead into the future of it. So that's the overview of what I'd like to do. There's a lot more we can get into. I'd like to get into the iris positions that I've now changed into what I call sectors. So there's a lot there we can do. So let me start by I'd like to thank a couple of people. One is I'd like to thank Harry Wolf, Bill Caradonna, who were the original founders of IIPA. I met them in the early 1980 or somewhere in there, 81. And they were the very first iridologists who I found treated me really well. And they were open-minded to what I had found. And we had some long conversations, and they very early on began to support the research and the development of RAYID. So kudos to them, because many experiences I had in the early days of iridology were not emotionally easy, and I must confess I have some residual emotional scars about how I was treated in the late 1970s, early 80s from iridologists. Because you should well understand, I don't consider myself an iridologist, not in the way that it has been taught in the past. So I didn't have any knowledge of iridology or any other system of the iris when I got involved in the iris. And I can tell you, I really did not want to be involved in the iris. So I will share with you a personal experience. There are 3 different parts of that experience. I'm going to share the middle part of it. There is a part about why my development led to an experience where the only thing I wanted in my life was a soul that related to the divine. I just wanted to have a divine relationship. Now, I won't explain how I got to that point, but I'll tell you what happened from that point on. I took myself away from people, got a very small studio apartment. I had some funds to be able to do that. And I basically fasted and meditated 10 hours a day. I meditated while laying down most of the time, but occasionally upright. And I began to plead, beg, pray for a relationship to the divine, because the previous experience I had shown me that the way that mankind lived was not in harmony with the divine. the way we treat each other, the way we treat nature, and so on and so on. I'm sure most of you would agree with that to at least some degree. But the only thing I wanted was a divine relationship. I wanted nothing to do with the mind, nothing to do with the personality, nothing to do with the body chemistry, nothing to do with relationships. The only thing I was interested is a one-to-one relationship with the divine. In the middle of this, after about 2 or 3 months of praying and begging, there came a single eyeball in the middle of my head. For me, it was annoying because it really felt like it was an abstraction created by my own mind. It was an iris, no sclera, an iris and a pupil, full detailed, constitution. And it just sat there and stared at me like a mosquito in the middle of my brain. And I wanted nothing to do with it. Because it was an eye of a human being. I saw right away it was a human eye. And then later on, another one would come. And another one would come. And I just ignored them. I wanted nothing to do with them. And the reason why I wanted nothing to do with them, I have to admit, I'm better now than I was then, I promise. I did not like people. Period. As a collective group, they're barbaric savages. What we do to ourselves, our children, the world, animals, sky, water, bombs, rape, plunder, mutilate. Who would want to live in a world like that, is what I thought. So why even bother relating to human beings when you could have a divine relationship? Makes perfect sense to my religious background. So I kept asking for, and here would come another iris. And another iris. And I was just getting annoyed with it. Then one day, a voice, very clear, very strong, very real, very audible voice, said these words to me. If you really want to know me, know my children. If you really want to love me, love my children. There was no hesitation about the source and or the meaning. The meaning was, sorry, what you're doing by escaping, by going into celibacy, by going into fasting, by isolating yourself from people, nice try, young man, but no. If you really want to know me, love me, it's them you have to love. And I realized that the iris was what I'm being given so that I could overcome my rejection of humanity and my judgment of humanity. Sorry, I said, no, give me anything else. How about trees or trout or something else? Stars, maybe? So I went back to ignoring the arrival of another iris and another iris and another iris. Another 2 months later, the voice comes back with compelling thunder this time. I mean, everything shook. If you really want to know me, know my children. If you really want to love me, love my children. And I said, okay, I don't like it, but I'm going to do it. A waterfall of irises came. Thousands and thousands of irises poured right through me. Well, by the way, I couldn't remember anything. I could see images of a mother feeding a baby and a child and this and that and a man and a woman and, entire cascades of generations of irises would come through me and I could remember nothing. So I asked, show me. And then I would see an iris of what looked like it was filled with holes. You can call them lacunas or whatever you want. I call it a flower. because the feeling I had about that particular iris was something splendid in nature, something celebratory, something in full display, like oh, by the way, I'm really not one of those, so I didn't really like people who do, hello, hello, hi, do you see me, do you see me, do you see me? Oh, that's how I saw the flower. And then shortly thereafter, there came another iris that had these little brown little speckles in them. You know, feel that one, and it felt like a diamond drill. The little brown spots were diamond drills. I go, wow, that's piercing. That's seeking. You know, I can kind of relate to this one. I like this drilling, seeking, wanting to know iris that just, well, turned out when I looked in the mirror, I had these little brown spots, so I could relate to these brown spots, but not those wavy other, well. Then I knew I had to begin to apply it on someone else. So I started to look at other people's eyes first without a light, and then a little flashlight, and then I found a little hobby light, and I would go and look, and it was you know how really difficult it is to get that close to another human being, and you go right down in there. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you, but it was scary to me to get that close to another human being. It was like my heart would thump as I'm getting over there closer, and I didn't really. And then someone says, "Well, you must be an iridologist." What? Yeah, you know, an iridologist, they look at the eye and they tell you about your health and, you know, all that stuff. I go, first I was disappointed. What I was going to do was already done. They say, yeah, go down to the health food store on the shelf. They have this big blue book called The Science and Practice of Iridology. I went down there and I opened up and found this book, and I read a few pages and I almost vomited. I'm sorry, I didn't like it. It wasn't true. For me, it wasn't true, because it was talking about all of the ugly things and the drugs and this and that and the damage, and all I wanted to see was the soul of the person. I still do. So when I do an iris, my primary reason for doing an iris is to really learn to have a greater rapport with that constitutional type of soul. That's what I wanted. That book was not at all what I was interested in. I just, no, thank you. I didn't want to be an iridologist, and I'm sorry, I still don't want to be one. Not in the way it was described then. So then some people came along and saw what I was doing and showed me how to use an iris camera. It was Michael Diogo, who was then working for Dr. Jensen, and his wife then Deborah Diogo, who's now Deborah St. Clair, something like that. And he showed me how to do iris photography, and I started paying people to go get their eyes photographed by iridologists, because if I could just give them $10 each, I could get the pictures and not have to deal with the person. Pretty smart, I thought, because then I got projectors and I started putting them on my wall. And I had as many as, 4 projectors at a time showing irises on the wall, and I would just show me. And then I started doing consultations, one at a time. In the beginning, I charged nothing, because I was there to learn how to be a better human being toward other people. And I realized that every single person that came was actually teaching me something about me. And they were teaching me something about how the human being works. But I wanted nothing to do with the mind. nothing to do with the personality. I wanted nothing to do with the body. Why bother with the body when you're just going to drop it anyway? Yes, I've changed completely since then. Now I recognize that the habitation of the soul responsibly occupies the body by being responsible for body chemistry, health, exercise, supplements, all the things that we need to take maximum stability in the physical body, take care of the physical body first, make sure it is equilibrated and open to the experience of discovering more. I've changed completely since then. I wanted nothing to do with relationships at all. Until one day, I was meditating, and this half-naked girl came into my meditation and was doing this. Well, to my shock, it happened to be one of the girls in the office where I worked at a local nursery. I wanted nothing to do with her because she was a heathen. She drank beer and ate burgers and all that other stuff, and I was a vegan and only grew my own food, and I was a purist and I meditated under the plants. But from then on, when I went in the office, I noticed that she would smile. Well, one thing led to the next, and pretty soon she knew exactly how to challenge me. Do you know how to play Boggle? I go, what is it? It's a game. Well, I love games. And anyway, we played the game. Long story short, sorry. Yes, well, never mind. You don't need the details, but what happened was I got her eyes photographed. So I put both of her eyes up with a pair of projectors, then the old Polaroid projectors, and I got mine, and I put all 4 of them up, and I noticed that they were completely different. She had the little open webs everywhere, and exactly where I had brown spots, she had open webs. And it was like the ends of a magnet that came together. And I go, wait, can this possibly be true? So I started paying couples. And sure enough, I saw the whole pattern of jewel and flower, left and right, and so on and so on. Long story short, that was a marvelous lesson. And I began to see that relationships were the dynamic cauldron that permits us to have the feelings necessary to move toward the divine. That's how I got into the iris. And so in the middle of doing the iris, I'm doing these things like this, and I see this situation where I was really curious about why a mother could come in, have 3 kids, and none of their irises were the same. So I go, is this all from the same husband? Yeah, it's all his 3 kids. And I look at the mother and look at the father, and the eyes of the kids don't match either one of the parents. I go, how does this work? How do you end up with 3 different kids? So I went back to the place of meditating again because I knew how to get information. Ask. Show me how this works. Show me how 3 different children could be related to somebody else in the family tree with a different constitution, and how do they come in like this? And I'm going, come on, you promised. If I asked hard enough, well, I'm sorry, I'm better now. I don't kick heaven's door anymore. I don't, throw emotional bombs, not as often. But I also recognize that a passionate desire to want to know something about the iris led me to a dramatic experience about how to understand the birth order. Now, what I thought I was trying to understand was just how do these 3 kids relate to their parents? And it must be these kids are relating somewhere to somebody in some combination in the family tree. And that's what I was asking for. I was asking for just a little bit of information. But what came one night was a download of how 6 different boys and 6 different girls, they come from 6 different parts, 12 different parts of the family tree, and there's an exact map for each one of the birth order. And I won't share with you in this moment, because I've shared it on tape before, how profoundly beautiful it was to see all of the souls in a canopy in the family tree funneling down through the mother and the father and being distributed down into the birth order in an exactly precise order, to where their iris structure, their body type, their personality, the unresolved symptoms coming in from the ancestry was exactly mathematically produced. Unfortunately, I could remember almost nothing because of the emotional content was so strong. I could not emotionally handle it, and it took me months to start to reconstruct it, and I haven't reconstructed 1 or 2% of it with the information I have now. There's just a lot more still to come. But this is how I got involved in looking at the iris. So what I felt was, this was the thing I needed to do, was to focus on the children and their relationships through their parents to their ancestry, resolve the dynamics of the problem in the children so that the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren do not have to take on the same unresolved issues that their parents had. So that's where I got into a whole different world of working with children, severely deformed infants. That's why I wrote stories, and so on and so on. And then I found out that children still have to live with their parents, and you won't be done with your mother for the rest of your life. Sorry. Just when you thought you were done with your mother, nope, you're still going to have to feel another higher level of the feeling with your mother, all the way up to the divine feminine. Sorry, you won't be done with your father either. So we're learning how to live in the world to do this. Now, all along the way, I learned how to distinguish boy number 3 from girl number 3, and it increased my appreciation and at times even my adoration of small children and their personality types. And their children are so much easier to love than their parents, and their grandparents, but they are. So I learned to begin the process of caring about children, and gradually I'm getting better and better about using the iris as a way of being able to get closer to people. So this is the motivation. I just wanted you to know what my motivation for the iris really is. Now, for me, as you can see this bubble behind me, I've always seen the iris as existing outside the body. I know that's weird, but I'm saying that this round bubble that you have, or sometimes it's more like an egg, this is a soap bubble, by the way. This is an actual soap bubble, that there is a field, an envelope around us, much like the iris, that corresponds to the subtle field of the body. Call it the aura if you want. You can call it the etheric, you can call it the astral, you can call it the mental body, the spirit body. It's called by dozens of other names on different continents. Whatever it is, we have a subtle energy, vitality. I call it a spirit body, and it links my soul to my physical body. So if I really want to know another human being, I'd really like to know how their soul feels. I want to relate to the soul of the person, because part of my experience is every person is distinctly unique and different, and there are no copies of people. There's just you and the other members of your family, and they're all different, and their families are all different. We're all different, but we're all connected, and we're all unique. So this is how I relate to the process of being able to combine the iris, the family tree, the birth order functions, the body types, and yes, I correspond all of the areas of the iris to glands, organs, body systems, and so on. Now, you know by now, most of you, you can get the birth order book and download it for free on my website. The Iris book. Also on the RAYID International Facebook, there's in the files, you can get a whole series of charts about the birth order charts, glands, organs, and body systems. So I'm not going to go through them all. But I would say the most significant thing for me to do is to learn how to have a greater rapport with different people. Let me show you some other irises. Here's 12 different constitutional types. It's not an exact order. It's not an exact sequence of constitutions. And I was looking for these individual constitutions. I noticed very early on that certain constitutions, if they have the open web patterns in them, and you can see them, that I typically had an easier relationship relating to an opposite constitution from my own. And I realized that if I found somebody who had the brown spot patterns just like me, male or female, it didn't quite seem to work as well. So I noticed that there was, like the woman I referred to, that we were opposites. There were jewel flower types. And so I started to look at jewel flower sequences in the arrangement of the irises. Now, the reason I did this is I was looking for the ideal link of the sequence of irises that might match the best therapeutic sequence. So I started to arrange the irises not in a circle like this, but arrange them in a straight line, trying to go, is it jewel flower, is it jewel flower stream shaker? Which one comes first? And I'm going to describe how my experiences of the iris now bring me to the conclusion so far, and I can change, by the way, that the jewel and the flower composition both derive their origin from the mother's side of the family. But the flower constitution derives it from the females in the mother's side of the family, hence mother's mother, mother's mother's mother, mother's father's mother, 3 grandmothers on the mother's side. They provide a female influence, and when that happens, the primary constitution turns out to be some kind of a flower structure. If the dominant structure is a jewel, then it emanates from one of the men on the mother's side, or a combination of the 3 men on the mother's side. So the jewel and the flower emanating from the mother's side of the family. There's even well-founded theoretical possibilities that the mitochondrial DNA may be the methylation source of the constitutional changes in the iris. Meaning, if you've looked at an iris at all, for those of you who've been around for a while, you look at an iris that's a flower, and you notice, and I photographed small babies who had irises that were flowers, and photographed them months and years later. I never once saw an actual change in a flower pattern of iris. No white fiber grew, nothing changed in the shape and curvature, except when I'm sure you've seen this, you put in enough light into the pupil, it constricts and it will straighten out all of the flowers. But like an accordion, the same pattern is still there. If you use a normal dilating light each time, you end up with the same pattern. I was really, really surprised that the flower patterns never changed once. I have no photographic evidence of a single fiber, which by now you know the fiber or the stroma is actually a vascular system circulating blood and other fluids to the muscle that constricts the pupil and helps clean the, and never mind, go all through the processes, but I've never seen a flower structure change. Not once. Another one that I did not see change was what I call the freedom rings, and that iridologists call the nerve rings. And, that if you had, 2 or more nerve rings, you're probably going to have a mental breakdown. And, well, I guess it's true because I had 2. And, I'm proof. I obviously, well, yeah, anyway, I don't mean to be rude or snide about any of that. But I really thought the nerve rings or freedom rings were like ripples on a pond. They looked like they were just ripples. Surely they're just waves that will go away in a day or 2. They don't. I was shocked to photograph small children, some of them under the age of 2, with these rings in their eyes, photograph them years later, and they're in the identical location. Now, my irises, which really have 40 years of before and after pictures, my little nerve rings, freedom rings, are exactly in the same location with exactly the same breaks. Now, I'm not going to go into rings for the moment, but I'm really talking to you about iris constitutional types and what changes and doesn't. But I have photographed children primarily of the stream or stream jewel or jewel constitution having no constitution at all for 2 months. And sometimes I've looked at small children, babies, and their eyes are just no fiber, just nothing. They're just blue. Quite remarkable. But after 3 months, after 4 months, things start filling in. We've not once actually photographed a brown spot or jewel in a child under the age of 2. Have a little brownish color in a child under 18 months, just slightly 16 months, but no actual jewel. But the jewels do form. We photograph them actually forming all the way up to 16 or 18 to some degree or another. And we even have present day pictures in my own iris or that from John Miles, most of you know. And we photograph little tiny, he likes to call them trout speckles, little tiny brown spots like dust forming in the iris. So yes, the jewel pattern does arrive, and it arrives primarily from the outside. So I'm interested in this sequence. Later on, I'll come back to you when we come back to the therapeutic function, because there is, in my opinion, a therapeutic sequence involved in iris constitutions, because there is a emotional sequence that matches the different times of the day. So you might imagine that each one of these has a different emotional content that corresponds with the sunset to sunrise and back again cycle of the day. So now therapeutically, I'm most interested in how to link these emotional patterns within my own self and create a greater ability for life force to move while utilizing the right biochemical, supplement, routine, nutrition, while using the right spirit, body, or vibrational remedies. So the combination of body, mind, soul, circulating the life force for me is my holy grail of wanting to utilize the iris wisely. So this is the history of how I got into it. Now I'd like to just take you through the explanation of a better explanation of jewel and flower. Let me show you another picture. Jewel, flower. By the way, this is really what I look at now anytime I do a consultation, because my comprehension is 100% of the population is either flower or jewel at some core level. This is the first experience of the separation of the process in the family tree. You have these two opposites. You can call them in the vibrational body constrictive or electro and magnetic, dilating, emanating. These are two opposites, the dilating, emanating, the emotionally responsive type versus the analytical type. Now, to me, everybody has a dominance to one or the other. Yes, everybody has substructures or other outcomes, and I'll go into stream and shaker as a way of modifying this. But when I'm doing a consultation, I just come right in to go, am I dealing with some form of a flower, or am I dealing with some form of a jewel? Now, I drew these lines in there specifically because for me, the jewels, they have 6 primary ways of being a jewel. And you can identify them, you can see them. And there are 6 primary ways of being a flower. Yes, you can identify them. They have emotional personality coordinates, they have body types, they have on and on and on, right? And each one of these is a gland, an organ, a body system that they use dominantly. So you know by now that the jewel type has a specific type of being in the world. They're a one-minded type. Their natural tendency is to use forces with their father to push away from masculine functions, from the outside world, and to go more to the inside world. Used to be, I would call, going left to right, going away from father, left brain, going into right brain. Jewels would go right brain to compensate for their naturally constrictive holding mechanism. So jewels would have a natural tendency to go alone. The flowers would have a natural tendency to go toward others. And that's a basic difference. Jewels have a tendency to desire to go alone initially. Later on, they have a compelling experience of needing emotional contact like everybody else does. They go in and out of that, but they have this constant pattern of wanting to understand, watch. They like to look at something. They like to analyze something. They're constantly searching for something. You can call them the seeker. So they're oftentimes looking to analyze, to discover, to categorize. Sometimes it's very intellectual. Their primary way is to go out of body and become more etheric. Now, the etheric nature of the jewel is in the mind because the primary place where they operate from is from their mental body. They don't realize that they're typically not really emotionally engaged in their body. They are etherically, intellectually driven to want to see, understand, explore, analyze, and so on and so on. You can see them in their beauty because that's their individuality, but they're on the mother's side of the family looking for the resolution of what drives them there. And what you'll find typically, even though they need to go over there, what they learn is they're supposed to be learning how to open, allow, receive, not judge, humility, nonverbal communication, feel. They're learning how to voluntarily feel. Good luck with that. On the other side, the flower goes left brain. This left brainness is primarily driven into categories about how to be with other people. Jewels typically, like me, I'm a jewel, usually don't want to relate too much to other people except at their own timing or convenience or their own way of doing it. They don't like to be controlled by other things. Flowers, on the other hand, their primary need is other people. So they have 6 different ways of other people. They are urgently looking for how to feel safe, secure, how to feel grounded in their own body. They want to be held. They want to be part of something. They want to belong. They want to develop friendship, sociality. They want to lead. They want prestige. They want to be seen. See me, see me, see me. Most jewels don't want you to see them. They typically want you to leave them alone. Let them read, let them study, let them analyze. But the flowers, they typically, like flowers in the field, they want to be seen. They want to be seen for a reason. Because if they can get a sense of security, a sense of safety, they might feel better. They'll be happy when they feel held and they belong and they feel wanted and they have enough friends on their messenger list. Why? Because they've left the mother's side of the family. Not an easy thing to do. I'm saying that something drives the flower's behavior. What drives the flower's behavior exists on the mother's side of the family. So they have to feel sad, they feel alone, they feel abandoned, they feel not wanted, they feel separated from themselves and who they are. So they're going to compensate for that by trying to be with something or having a logical control of the world around them. Enough logic, enough prestige, have a degree, have money, have coordination, have logical organization of feelings. They use their logical abilities to act like a mental type when in reality they're doing all of that flower behavior as an addictive compensation for the feeling of loss and not being wanted on the mother's side of the family. The jewel is pretty much doing the opposite. They're using fear of criticism, fear of being controlled, fear of authority, rage at authority. They don't like bureaucracy or big banks or militaries or aliens. They don't like anybody controlling them. But then they marry somebody who is an opposite, tries to grab them, hold them. I need you to do this for me. And they go, leave me alone. And I won't go into all the many kinds of relationships, male and female, because you could be male or female in either one of these constitutions, and you're familiar with this type. Now, eventually, I'm going to say to you, if you just do jewel and flower in your iris and you identify the strengths and weaknesses of the strengths of being a flower going left brain is logic and organization, the ability to have passion about life, the ability to be able to organize what she wants, to be coordinate, to arrange graphics, or to be a television producer or something else, or to have many friends. So she has a way of gathering, or he has a way of gathering emotional relationships through friendships or a fraternity or a business network. So there's so many ways that this side over here has the ability to materialize. The flower side has a tendency to materialize things. You can have a jewel going to the right who materializes something new, like an iPhone, or if you look at Amazon, by the way, Bezos is a very right-brain guy who had all these ideas about how to do things different, but gave it over to other people to be able to manage. So the going to the right person is highly creative, imaginative, or they keep going on into the etheric world. Jewel, flower. This is basically what I work with. Yes, we can modify it, and I'll come back and show you some more about how to do it with stream and shaker at another time, but just learn the different ways of being jewel, positive or negative, the different ways of being a flower, positive or negative. This will give you the ability to be able to start. And you're going to have symptoms of each one of these different categories. Symptoms in different parts of the body. What are some of the common symptoms? Well, the common symptom is inflammation, emotional reaction. Emotionally, they also have a tendency to become needy or demanding, so they can be obsessively organized. They can be also, because they're cutting off the right brain or the mother side, anger or pain with mother or sisters. That goes into periodic sadness. So they go periodic waves of sadness and feeling alone, feeling abandoned. Phew. You really want to know more about people? Start here. Then we can go gradually into all the different levels of combinations of these two opposites. But it always leads down into the same thing. It's going to lead into there's something driving them. There's something driving them. Where is that something actually located? It's located inside the mother's side of the family. It's located in the reflection of the genetic code of the mother's family, not her genome. It's usually related to the epigenome. So we're going to discuss what does it mean that both the jewel and the flower are from the mother's side of the family, whereas the stream, which is an outer safety and security person, and the shaker, which is a change-oriented mobility type, they're primarily related to the father's family. So yes, we get our inner jewel flowerness from our mother, we get our stream and shakerness from the father, but the ability to change and the ability to go in the future, both on the mother's side. Yeah, I've struggled with this for a long time. How is it that women have a greater long-term influence, not only biochemically, but emotionally and physically with their children than men do? I'm sorry, but I'm up to 90 to 95% of it is basically coming through the mother's side of the family. Probably will reach 100% one day, but the answer is to open up the inner gates and resolve the drivers on the mother's side of the family. So this is a introduction to the history of how I got into the iris. This is an explanation, the base way I can to give you the jewel flower appreciation. But I'm still working on the part about I got to do what? I've got to know and understand, and that if I learn more about the human being and I appreciate the divine diversity of all of the different iris constitutional types that are actually reflections of different souls, you mean if I learn more and more about all of these, I can actually have a greater ability to feel more? And in the process of feeling more, I can make choices that are different? So yes, I'm saying that the study of the iris is a study of the human soul. The study of the human soul is the primary way to know and feel other people more. If you look at their bodies, it's too easy to judge them as sweet and innocent when they're children, but when they're older and they're not healthy, or they're obese, or they're angry, or there's something else, or there's something else, or they're 80 years old and they're frail, they're harder to love in their natural state. They're easier to love if you see the inner miracle of the human soul and the diversity that they have. So to love the inner soul of the person and not necessarily ignore the outer form, but facilitate the outer form and facilitate the nutrition and facilitate the mind with vibrational understanding or vibrational medicines, can increase our capacity to feel. If there's one thing that the iris has really taught me, it's about the significance and importance of rapport. How do you build rapport with a jewel? How do you build rapport with a flower? Because when it comes down to it, the number one thing that I believe that we're responsible for doing is educating. I'll take no more than 5 to 10 minutes to look at an iris and do a birth order family tree pattern to get which kind of a person am I dealing with, and then spend the rest of the time, the rest of the hour or 2 hours, educating them about their responsible use of that type. So rapport is important. If you can describe attributes in them, and they don't have to say anything, if you can describe their mate, and their mate's not in the room, they develop an appreciation for who you are. If you can describe their 4 children and you've never met them, you establish a type of trust that leads to the quality of rapport. So what are you going to do with that rapport? Give them more supplements? Yes. If those are necessary to balance the body, yes. How do you use that rapport to guide them back to personal responsibility, not just for their diet, not just for their mind, but for the eventual progression that their soul is going to make? How do you educate them? Now that they trust you, what are you going to say? Well, we'll have to come back to find the answer to that, because we're going to go into the whole therapeutic sequence as well. Well, I'd say that's enough for now. Write down your questions. You can send them to me in the email if you want, because the IIPA office will have my email, and then I'll do my best to answer them if you're not going to be present at the question and answer sessions that we'll set up. Make some questions. Draw this out. Learn as much as you can. Okay. Thanks for coming. See you again.